Hey guys, it's a very melancholy episode. Our friend of the show, Derek Royal, who hosts the Comics Alternative and is co-hosted with us, and we've co-hosted with him in crossover episodes. He passed away very recently. I had been thinking about Derek. We had talked about another crossover, and was kind of reaching out to some people a few days ago. And then lo and behold, a post came up yesterday. It was very eerie that he had passed from heart disease. He was a little older than me, but not much. Very sad, way too young. And I was kind of just thinking back. We've done some interesting crossovers. We did a crossover on Waiting for the Trade with the Comics Alternative guys, and Kyle and I, maybe Bob back then. I'll try to find that and throw that on here as well. And we did like a best of 1 year as a crossover. That was fun. And the cool thing about Comics Alternative was they always focused on the indie books, and they focused on non-Big Two stuff. Derek always said he liked that stuff. Liked it fine. Nothing wrong with it. But they got plenty of publicity. Everybody talked about those. He wanted to shine a light on the smaller publisher and the first seconds, and drawn in quarterlies, and the tiny publishers in the back. And he was a big Image proponent of as well. Just a real joy to talk to. Great guy to be around. Smartest guy in the room, and he was really a great podcaster for a lot of years, since 2012, I think. He's been doing it, and so he predates Kyle and I. Kyle actually wrote some reviews for his website. I think they're still up. I think I remember him doing one for Spread and one for Cal, an issue of Cal, and so Kyle was doing writing reviews for him over there on his site. You probably still find them, as well as some of our crossover episodes. Some may be lost to time, but I did find one. I want to try to stitch it together with this, just as a remembrance of Derek. Good guy, great podcaster, great comics promoter, and a nice fella, and he was taken way too soon. So my condolences go out to him and his family. Read a comic today in his honor. Just not a Big Two comic. Make it an indie comic. And if you go over to his site, you can go over find it on Facebook or Twitter if you want to. Go to his website and you reach out to him that way. You can drop him a note if you were a fan. Feel free. Or you can, if you go to Facebook and search for Derek Royal, DEREK ROYAL, you can see all the outpouring of surprise and shock and sadness and celebrating of him, and read some of that stuff. I won't read it here. It's just way too much. And I don't think I could get through it. But feel free to check that out. Anyway, sad to hear, but I wanted you to if you didn't know about Comics Alternative or Derek, to give this a listen and check out one of our crossover episodes. So thank you.
This is the Comics Alternative, episode 86.1. A roundtable discussion on trade waiting.
Countdown for blast off. X minus 5, 4, 3, 2, X minus 1, fire.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this special episode of the Comics Alternative, we're doing a crossover with another podcast. And we've done things like this before, but this is the first time that we'll be talking with the guys at the podcast Comics for Fun and Profit. So we got in touch with Drew, Kyle, and Bob and asked them if they were interested in doing a podcast crossover. They said yes, and then we decided on a topic.
That's right, and our topic is trade waiting.
And we came at it from a variety of different angles. Some of those reflect, the different focuses of the podcast. But before we get, though, to our conversation, we want to let all of our listeners know that this special crossover episode of the Comics Alternative, is brought to you by Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com and they'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There you'll find DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For the other publishers, you'll find a discount of 20 to 35% off the cover price, and they have specials that go even higher than that, 45% off, 55% off, and even more.
That's right, and this month all Marvel trades and hardcovers are 50% off, and as usual, they have quite a few bundles where you can get more than one comic for a deeper discount than you would for if you got them individually. So, for example, as usual, they have a Valiant bundle in which you can get all of the recent comics from Valiant for 50% off, and they have Dynamite's Justice Incorporated bundle where you can get all the covers to the first issue of Justice Incorporated for 50% off.
That's right. And they have a lot of other specials there. So, for instance, they have a number of Steve Ditko comics, which they do every now and again at special discounted prices. A lot of things like that. You have to go to the website to find out about all their specials for the month of June. And you can do so by going to dcbservice.com. Go there and they'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And when you do, tell them the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
So, you want to get into our roundtable discussion?
Let's do it.
Hey guys, here we are, and this is the first time we've had a podcast crossover between Comics for Fun and Profit and the Comics Alternative. So I want to thank everyone for actually being able for us to coordinate a time, because I think all three of you from Comics for Fun and Profit are here, and then both Andy and I, so we got 5 people.
Yeah, we're really clogging up the airwaves. This is Drew Ellinger with Comics for Fun and Profit, and my compatriots are...
Go ahead, Bob.
Me? Oh, me. This is Bob, Comics for Fun and Profit. You can find me doing comic book reviews with Drew over here.
And this is Kyle. I usually end up doing a lot of the sneak peeks at the upcoming things with Drew.
Yeah, basically, we focus on some of the basics that a lot of folks do. A lot of your comic podcasts do. We do the reviews, but we also our angle is our what makes us a little unique in the marketplace is that we focus on comic book speculation and the flipping of comic books and the sale of comic books, and some of us are more aggressive than others. We're all readers and lovers of the genre, but we also have fun selling our comics too.
And some of us need to pay for our comic habit by selling comics.
Exactly.
Is the biggest thing.
Exactly. So that's us.
And this is the Andy from the Comics Alternative, and Derek, I guess since you started off, I can say something about the show.
Please do.
And so we call ourselves the two guys with PhDs talking about comics, and we try to take, as our title says, an alternative approach to comics that is not not talk as much about mainstream superhero comics from DC and Marvel as maybe a lot of other podcasts do, but instead try to focus on the independent stuff from things like places like Image Comics to self-published comics.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, it's not like we've made a decision definitely not to review mainstream superheroes, although Andy and I can help ourselves every now and again. I guess almost on every episode we bring up superheroes in some form or another.
Well, yeah, it is comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we started to talk about a possible topic, because it's one thing to say, hey, let's do a podcast crossover. It's something else entirely to come up with a topic that we can all agree on and all of us think will make an engaging topic for conversation. I think you guys there, Drew, threw out the possibility of trade weighting, which I thought, was great, and Andy and I talked about it. This is something that it comes up every now and again on the Comics Alternative, but we only talk about it in passing. It's like, one of us will say, yeah, okay, it's pretty good, I'll wait for the trade. And then we'll move on.
Yeah, that phenomenon, I didn't get it for the longest time. I didn't know how folks could wait when that content is out there. It's sitting on the shelf, it's begging to be read, and I never understood the folks that just sit there and wait. And especially some of these schedules like DC takes forever to put out something in a trade, and the Image is not too bad, but at DC it takes forever, and I couldn't figure it out. But now I've kind of get it now. Some of the titles really lend themselves to trade, and I really do get why people do what they do with the trade weighting.
And every single time we talk about a few of our favorite authors, Kirkman in general, we talk about everything Kirkman's ever done. Some of it takes so long to get to what we like it to. So every single time we review a single issue, we say, maybe we should have stacked a few of these or waited for a trade, because some of it just reads so much better in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I read Walking Dead in trade, I often have a hard time figuring out where the issue breaks are.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it just goes very smoothly.
It's much better in chunks. And so I totally get it now, why they do it.
Well, maybe one way to begin is if we can start by talking about our own habits of reading and buying comics, and as idiosyncratic as those might be.
Well, for me, I'm mostly digital. I would say 50% digital, 60% digital, and then the rest floppy comics. I do mail order comics, so I'm waiting on a lot of my books from DCBS. Plugged them. Sorry. You can cut that out.
There are sponsors, so we can,
okay, there we go. That's good.
Yeah,
I never mention their name because they do not sponsor us.
We did the same thing at first until they decided to sponsor us. We wouldn't say their name on the podcast, but now we proudly do.
There you go. Okay, go DCBS then. So I kind of flip flop back and forth between the single issue and really don't read anything in trade myself.
Myself.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm almost purely floppy comic. I'm really big into anything Image does. I grab the first one. Anything that grabs me. I'm not big on short run things that have a short set like of 5 or of 6. But anything I think from Image is going to be a long haul or has the ability to, I'm always jumping on that right from the get-go. I always want those in collectible form because, like I said, I love to speculate. I love for a book to gain some value and stuff like that. So I usually always go for the first Image, things like Cal or things that really hit my speculation. I usually grab 2 or 3 of just so I have my personal collection and something to possibly spec on. But I absolutely eat Image first stuff up, and then I've got a few of the regular Bat books I get, but I'm almost all primarily literal comic.
Okay.
Yeah. How about you, Bob?
Oh, good. I got to go last. I wanted to go last because I am a mashup. I got to do digital for my reviews because, like Drew, I wait on my DCBS box to get here because I like to pre-order. I like to do that to, I speculate, try to get ahead of things, try to order the stuff I think is going to be hot and the stuff I love as well. And I just love sitting there with a trade. So normally I already know the book is going to be good because I've already read it. I'll also buy the trade to keep on my shelf, break that bad boy open, and enjoy the story again, especially if I know from reading single issues that it works better in a trade. Some of those being Walking Dead, and I really enjoy Mind Management in big chunks too, so I always pick those up.
Andy, what are your habits? I know we bring it up every now and again.
One of the reasons why I was interested in this topic is that I'm kind of in a period of transition, and I'm sitting in my office, which barely has a trail that I could get through. that is not comic boxes or stacks of loose comics or stacks of trades that don't fit on the shelves that I have in here, and so I'm starting to think more heavily on digital, and to just kind of to reduce the clutter and to not have to buy a new house. But also I've noticed especially with a lot of the image stuff, I'm moving almost all my image titles I read regularly to trade at this point, and part of that reason isn't to do with space or economics, but that I am finding with, say, like Jonathan Hickman stuff with East of West or Manhattan Projects, I'll read an issue and when it comes out, and I'll feel like I can't remember what's going on in this book, and I'll have to, and so I feel like if I was reading it maybe in 6-issue chunks, I would be feeling better about that. But there's some titles that I won't do that with, like Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky's Sex Criminals, and sort of with Mind Management, because both of those sets of creators do things that make the single issue worth getting.
Yeah.
The letter pages in Sex Criminals are hilarious. Yeah. And as long as they're gonna put those there and not in the trades, I'm gonna keep doing that. And and Matt Kindt actually kind of makes the experience of reading the individual issue every month of Mind Management a unique experience that you can't get if you do the trade. And so I really appreciate those creators who are doing something to kind of encourage that. I think Ed Brubaker does it too, with a lot of the stuff he does. So there's those books, and then there's those books I feel like I'm transitioning into trades. There's those books that create a unique experience that I want to keep reading. And then there's the kind of third category, and this is where for me right now, a lot of Marvel titles are fitting into the stuff that I really want the experience of reading as they come out on a weekly basis. That I feel like the comics that I really, really like, the anticipation of them every week is kind of the way I used to feel when I was a kid buying comics, and I think a lot of that's returning with the Marvel comics I'm reading now.
Several of you have mentioned, in the context of buying habits, digital. That's something, I didn't even think about when we first started to discuss this idea, and I can see where that would figure into the trade versus single issue, although that's kind of another argument in a way, depending on how you look at it. Now, my own buying habits, I rarely get digital comics, although I can see where Andy is definitely coming from in terms of space and storage has become an issue. But and also being able to navigate in my study. There's that. But with me, usually with the big two, with the exception of Vertigo, I don't get single issues. Especially with the superhero narratives, I wait until a story arc is complete or an event. Of course, now they're like about every other month, it seems. After one of those has been completed, and then I'll read it. In collected in some way. With certain publishers like Image, I usually don't get trades because I already get the individual issues, and if I had more money, then I would double dip in waiting for, getting the issues and then getting the trades. Now, there's some titles, several of us have mentioned Walking Dead, and I think that's a great example that we'll continue to come back to on today's discussion, because I don't get individual issues of Walking Dead, and the primary reason is because I came to Walking Dead relatively late in the game. I guess, I don't know where they were, maybe issue 30-some, 40-some, something like that. And so what I started to do to play catch-up is not to get the trades, but to get the hardbound deluxe, which basically collects 2 trades. And so I won't even get the trades to Walking Dead now. I'll just wait until those hardback volumes come out. So I have to wait a little longer.
Absolutely, and somebody who waited quite a bit on Walking Dead myself, the omnibus saved me from having to do any of that kind of thing. It's the only reason I was able to catch up.
Yeah, and sometimes if I do have the funds with a title that I absolutely love, like Fables, I definitely get all individual issues of Fables. I don't get the trades, but what I will do is when DC comes out with one of those nice deluxe editions, the hardbounds, then I'll double dip in that way. And those don't come up that often, so it can be affordable to a point. But what all of you were saying is fascinating, because before we started the podcast recording tonight, what I did was I sat down and I wrote out a number of benefits of going with individual issues and a number of benefits of going with the trades. And so I'd like to maybe go over a few of these, and you guys have already mentioned some, and then chime in with others. So for instance, some of the benefits of buying individual issues is you want the story sooner, and you just don't want to wait because it's such an engaging story. You want the next chapter. Okay.
Yeah, and the idea, especially with us being podcasting as well about a hobby, timeliness is key.
Exactly.
We can't wait for these stories, and if people are sensitive to spoilers, you're gonna get spoiled on things if you're waiting for the trade as well. So that's kind of the problem with trades in my mind.
Yeah, and in fact, that's another reason. I think it's kind of a subcategory in a way. It's the need to keep up and be current. And I think for those of us who are in the media, because we're media people, right? We're bloggers, we're podcasters, and so it's nice to keep up with the subject matter as best as we can. Another reason, and this is, I think, what you guys can speak to more than Andy and I, at least in our podcast focus, is collectability, right? Because if you are in it for collecting, even partly, then individual issues are going to be necessary.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to sell. There are very few trades that have any value.
Right.
Your occasional hardcover goes out of print and skyrockets, but it goes hand in hand for me, the collectability aspect of the issues with the difficulty storing hardcovers and trades. In my house, I have the same problem Andy has. I'm running out of house. And so that's really what set me on the road to, it's time for somebody else to enjoy these comics. Let's sell these and get these out there into the world. And that lets me have some space back in my office. And if I replace that with trades and hardcovers, I don't know that I would really gain anything. So I've got to kind of move towards a digital plane, I think.
Something that a couple of you mentioned, I think maybe even indirectly, is this is a fourth reason why I was thinking, one of the benefits of buying individual issues, and that is, just kind of a love of comic books, or just the idea of a comic book, the physicality of holding it in your hand, and not just holding, like a trade. I mean, it's a little different, many people call them floppies, it's just a different feel than holding a trade or even a hardcover collection in your hand. And so, I mean, there's some people who really enjoy that. So that would be a benefit of buying the individual issues. And another reason is, and this is one of the things I try to keep in mind, is many times when you're talking about smaller publishers, especially self-publishers, you're helping out the artist who in many times is the publisher, and I think a great example of that is Terry Moore. And if you buy the individual issues, the likelihood of certain titles sticking around for a decent period of time, I think, is increased. Whereas buying from the big two, is like getting a Marvel or a DC individual title in a comic book. It's not going to break them, right, if we don't. So they can always put out more, and they're going to regardless. But when it comes to smaller presses and individual, like self-published artists and writers, I think buying the individual issues does help them.
A great example of that is we recently did an interview with Laramie Taylor, who is the creator of A Voice in the Dark and for Image, and a great guy, but his margins are wafer thin, and it matters when he gets another 100, 200, 500, 1,000 copies of his comic sold, his single issue comic. That matters a lot to him. I mean, he lives off of that money, and his single issue sales are very important to him being able to continue to create and to even get to the viability of a trade. And so to echo your point, some of these guys aren't going to even make it to the trade because they need those single issue sales to prop them up financially, at least long enough to get there.
That's interesting because I was recently talking to Tim Seeley, and I like to talk to him when we get together about the kind of business side of things anyway. And he was telling me with Hack Slash that the individual issues of Hack Slash either break even or lose money. He sells about 4,000 to 5,000 copies a piece of those. But the omnibus collections that he has put out, and I think there's 4 or 5 of those, sell somewhere around 30,000 copies a piece,
right,
like per year. And so he's all the money he is making off of that.
But see,
he's from those.
He's Image Central, where Laramie is Top Cow. So Seeley has the $2,500, $3,000 per issue payout that comes off the top, whereas Top Cow has some ownership of that of Voice in the Dark, and so he can sell less and make more on that side. So it just depends on what your deal is, what your creator-owned deal is, I guess.
He's also saying too that his audience isn't a single issue audience either. That they're in bookstores, and they're not also, in fact, not necessarily reading a lot of other comics.
Really?
Yeah.
And he does Revival also, right?
Yeah. And he said that Revival's also doing very well for them in the trades.
As a person who falls behind on Revival, I find it quite fun to read in bulk, or in essentially the trade format in and of itself. So I can see where Tim Seeley's writing really lends him to a trade format. But also, he just did a superhero crossover with Nightwing that was a single issue one-off, and he did a great job on that.
Yeah, and he's doing Grayson coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier for writers to stack their works up, and I think it would probably be easier for a writer to live off of 3 or 4 titles selling a couple thousand issues apiece than a writer, artist, letterer, colorist like Laramie, who it takes him the entire 28 days to get that issue out. I mean, all his eggs are in one basket, really.
Yeah, and along with this, and there are going to be some cases like Andy mentioned with Tim Seeley, that he makes more from the collections than he does with the individual titles. But kind of an opposite case, I just recently interviewed Terry Moore, and he pointed out that the future of currently Rachel Rising is based on these individual issues. So if those sales remain halfway decent, then he's going to be able to continue putting out the individual issues, or not only just the individual issues, but Rachel Rising period. I mean, we have so far 3 trade collections of Rachel Rising, but he said that it's the sales of each monthly issue that's going to determine whether he's able to carry this out or not, or carry it on.
And he's a one-man shop as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
He and his wife are basically Abstract Studios, but yeah. So that's a very different case. Another reason that I came up with for why people may want to buy individual issues is for cover art. Now, I know that in a lot of trades we get at the back, not every time, but many times we get, let's say, the cover gallery. And that's fine, and especially if those cover galleries are full page. I mean, sometimes, what publishers will do is they'll squeeze 4 or sometimes more covers onto one page, and at that point I say, why? I mean, if I want to see, the lushness of the covers, then don't give them to me too small. Give it to me full page, kind of like it would be like a full cover. If that's going to be an extra added bonus for a trade. So if you're interested in cover art, especially with alternative covers, and when we're talking about the big 2, especially Marvel, you can have a gazillion alternative covers that and that goes to collectibility as well. And the last reason I came up with, and again, they're
wait a minute before you move on.
Okay,
before you move on from that, so do you think when Marvel collects the first 6 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, the reboot and renumber, relaunch, whatever your wording is, do you think they'll collect all 43 covers full page in that trade for the first issue?
For the first collection that they have?
Yeah. So will they insert all the variant covers for issue 1 in that trade? Or will they be the size of a postage stamp on
the latter, because it's not cost effective.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, if you're into cover art, I could see someone gravitating toward individual issues over trades, if that's where you're going. Now, another reason, and this is something that I've done myself, or one of my own reasons for getting individual issues, and then inversely a reason why I like to get trades as well, is if you're interested in the process. Okay, and so there are many creators who will change things going from the individual series, the serial run, into trade. Either they will tweak or change something that was previously published, and it could be something as simple as minor artwork, or it could be something major like part of the plot. And then many times they'll add to the storyline that they didn't either have time for, or for whatever reasons didn't, in the original serial run. And you find this a lot with miniseries. I know one case in point is last year when Gilbert Hernandez collected the individual installments of Julio's Day, which had appeared in the second series of Love and Rockets. He added quite a bit to the book collection, and it made a big difference in the way that the story was told. And so sometimes if you want to see how an artist and a writer changes the story as it goes along, even from packaging, from individual serial issues to the trade, that can be fascinating. So you'd need to have those individual issues on hand in order to see the process.
Yeah, the same thing. There's an example of that in Walking Dead with the issue 50 and issue 75, the little Easter eggs that Kirkman puts into those with the dream sequence and the alien sequence. Those are things you're only going to find in your single issue that he promised he would not put in omnibus or trade form. So there's something for his month-to-month people who pick up the traditional floppy that he said he'd just leave in there and wouldn't reprint in the trades.
Yeah. Oh, and in fact, that reminds me of something. One of the other reasons that I overlooked, and this is something that Andy pointed out early on, is that you don't have letter pages in trades.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have forwards. You don't have afterwards. Sometimes you don't have sketch art. And in the case of, and again, something Andy brought up, mind management, with that first narrative arc, one of the things that Matt Kent did was, if you take the back cover of the first several issues and you put them together, it presented a particular image that, of course, you couldn't get with everything together there in the trade. And so there are a lot of little specials that you get with individual issues. Of course, on the other hand, there are certain things that you get in trades that you don't get with the individual issues. For instance, sketch art or alternative endings to the story. I know I just recently reviewed Gilbert Hernandez, Fatima, the Blood Spinners for our blog, and the story that we get in Fatima is basically the story that we get in that 4 or 5 issue miniseries.
3 issues.
Was it just 3? God.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was off with 5. So it's basically the exact same thing. Now, you do get in Fatima some extra sketch art in the book that Dark Horse put out earlier this year, which is good. On the other hand, there is 1 page of sketch art that appeared in that last issue of the miniseries that you don't get in the collected issue, the edition. So, sometimes you get more from one packaging format, sometimes more from the other. It all depends.
I think it was Scott Snyder, maybe in a podcast on with Kevin Smith's Batman on Batman podcast, where he talks about the Death in the Family trade that he when the single issues were released, there was a point of clarity there that folks weren't getting. They weren't getting the point well enough through the single issues. Mm-hmm. So he rewrote it a little for the trade to nail that point home and to really hammer it home and spell it out a little bit more. And I thought that was really interesting. And I had not realized that creators did that and took those liberties, transferring their single issue arcs to trade and kind of tweaking and improving stories or deleting things.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I just looked it up. Fatima was 4 issues.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. But it wasn't.
Then I only have 3.
Oh. Uh-oh.
Was it really good, even without that last issue?
I don't know. Maybe I was waiting for the trade. Just on the last issue, it was not a. That's not an economically viable system. I'm looking. I got a stack of DC trades and hardcovers in front of me of recent ones, and I'm looking through them, and almost all of them, with only maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, have some kind of bonus features in the back, which is either the cover galleries or sketch art or something. So it looks like DC is making that a fairly universal part of their, or script excerpts too, a fairly universal part of their publishing strategy.
And you mentioned Sex Criminals in that first trade. Really had some nice stuff in it and added bonuses too. It was a really nice package.
I'll need to get that.
Yeah, I didn't get it. What did they offer?
A lot of the covers that you would have to chase. They showed some of those alternate covers and the variant printing covers that were the really funny ones where they look like a Sears portrait with Chip Zdarsky and Matt Fraction posing like a.
Don't put those in the trade. I actually chased after all of those.
yeah, but they give it to you in the trade. I thought that was really nice, and they're really doing they're doing some great stuff there with that title.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a question. As I said, I have never bought a Marvel trade. Does a Marvel trade come with a trade digital code?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because one other advantage to some of the Marvel individuals is you get that digital code with it, and if that's not included in the trade, which I don't believe it is, but I wasn't sure, that's another advantage of your single issue comic over waiting for your trade.
I think some do and some don't. I'm wondering, since you guys deal with the speculation side, I wonder in general, I don't know what the statistics are for who actually turns in those codes when they buy their comics, but does that, if I do that, if I peel back that flap and get that number, have I ruined the value of that comic?
Not so far.
And CGC has come out and said it does not affect grading in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, really? Really?
Yes. And those codes expire after 1 year anyway, so after 1 year, it's kind of a moot point.
Not even that sometimes.
So, yeah, not even a year at sometimes.
Well, I'm going to town tonight.
Well, Andy,
I have my week planned out now.
You've been saving them?
Yeah, I have a long box here of all my Marvel Now comics, and I'm So while we're talking here, I'm going to start punching those codes in.
Start submitting.
So don't mind me. No, but like there were a few issues recently that Marvel did, like Avengers 24, that not only has the code for that issue, but also has a code for a trade in it.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Yeah, so you could get. I'm trying to look at it now. I think you can get the first 6 issues, right?
Yeah.
Well, you see, this brings up the question of what you get for your money. And, I know that this comes up a lot when we're talking about the costs of individual issues, right? Because up until, recently, DC had been pretty good for the most part at holding the line at $2.99. And so when Marvel charged more, one of the things they could say that they offered for the extra buck is, hey, you can get a digital copy. Now, whether you think that that's worth it or not, at least it's offering something. Because sometimes, you pay more than $2 or $3.99, and you don't even get much more, if any more, story content. So I know that, there's some titles that, give you more or less in working with the price accordingly. Getting back to the trade, though, if I get a trade of something and I get nothing more than what could have been found in the individual issues, I feel a little cheated, especially if I choose to double dip. Now, if I didn't get the first, the individual issues originally and then I get the trade, I really have nothing to complain about. But if I get the individual issues and then for any number of reasons decide to get the trade and there's nothing extra in it, I'm not happy.
But some of the hardcovers, as opposed to the softcover trades, aren't they a little oversized sometimes? So you get a bigger page even?
That's especially true with Marvel stuff.
Yeah. And then for the DC, you could sell me on trades so that I wouldn't have to read that channel 52 thing at the end of each issue.
Oh, yeah.
So that alone is worth the price of trade waiting, I think.
Wow. See, that's the inverse of what I brought up earlier about how in individual issues you get these nice things that you don't get in the trades, but because you get the channel 52 that you don't get in the trades,
and
there's a reason not to get. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just want the second part of that Harley Davidson story that's on the back of all the Marvel comics. I'm tired of seeing the first part. Where's that coming? It says 1 of 6. Where are the other 6? I'm just kidding, but it has the Wrecking Crew in it.
I don't get those issues, so I have no idea what you're talking about. You lost me. Yeah.
Edit this out.
Well, we talked about some of the benefits of individual issues of serials. Obviously one of the biggest benefits of getting a trade is the cost.
Yeah.
It especially in the case of Image, who they've been doing an incredible job at keeping the price, especially the first volume of the trades, very affordable. And of course, if you find some place like Discount Comic Book Service, which many of us, if not all of us, use.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, for the record. Then incredible deals.
Yeah, it's I love the $4.99 trade. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's a lot of those $9.99 trades you can get for $4.99 on that first release date, and what a bargain! And you're right, it's mostly the Image stuff. And
I'm almost always guaranteed to pick up the Volume 1 Image trade. It's just too hard to pass up, really.
Did you get the Manifest Destiny in trade?
Oh yeah, sure.
And what it was in that? I was curious.
Oh, I didn't. I ordered it. I did not get it.
Oh, okay. It's on its way.
Yep.
That economics thing is I find interesting with, Marvel's trade policy, and we could probably have a whole show on Marvel's trade policy, and how one might feel about that. But that when they release a hardcover, it's usually actually a couple dollars more than what you would pay for the individual issues. And then it's another year or so before, or if the trade paperback comes out, which is the more economically viable alternative. And that frustrates me. That frustrated me with, especially with Spider-Man, which I had, at least for the first few, when when Spider-Man went bi-weekly, I was just getting it in trades, and then I stopped at one point when there was one trade that had one issue of Spider-Man, 2 issues of some Spider-Man specials, and that was it.
And see, that's they're taking a publishing model of putting a hardcover out, before you get the paperback, like for novels and things.
Yeah.
It's a different animal. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous practice. I think hardcovers are for those super fans of that title that want the slip cover and the dust jacket and the ribbon in there, and have it on the wall and in the bookshelf. I hate the fact that they're using it, putting it out first, so that it's the only thing to buy, to get that collected, and then you have to wait and wait and wait for the trade. I really like Image's model of putting it in as many people's hands as they can.
Yeah, it also ensures less attrition.
I think so, because especially back at Image again, I think Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples kind of started this, and it may predate this, but I noticed it first with Saga, taking the hiatus after your story arc to collect it in trade, take the month off, let everybody catch up, let that trade have a full month of sales juice without any competition from your title on the shelf, and then start the next arc. So there's clear points of entry and throughout. And this last hiatus was a little long, but for the most part, I've noticed a lot of other Image creators that seem to be jumping on board, that they take that month hiatus to put their trade out and then start up again.
More and more Image titles are doing that, where that's seeming to become, at least for the ongoing series, the norm.
And again, Walking Dead is the exception, because Kirkman just won't stop. He just keeps cranking them out.
God, okay, I'm blanking now. I was talking with someone recently. I can't remember it. I'm ashamed that I can't. A creator who works with Image, and he said to me that when they started their I know, it was Joe Eisma. It was at the Dallas Con, and I was asking him about this. I said, now a lot of titles, with Morning Glories, I said a lot of titles at Image, do have a narrative arc, which is about 5 or 6 issues. Then there's a brief hiatus, and they use that to prime the pumps, get their juices going again, taking a little break so they can be ready for the next arc and not burn out. And I said, have you guys considered going to a model like that? And he said, no, we have no plans on that. This wasn't the way it was at Image when we started a few years ago, Morning Glories. And so they have just maintained, this routine, this regular kind of publishing schedule like you'd find with DC and Marvel. And he may have speculated, if I remember correctly, that if we had started several years later, like a lot of titles have been over the past 1 or 2 years at Image, then maybe they would do the whole hiatus thing. But they just haven't been doing it. But he said it really wasn't much of an option when they got started with Morning Glories.
Yeah, that's curious. That is interesting.
Yeah. Another reason, and we've already mentioned this, I think all of us have in one form or another mentioned this, reasons of going with the trades, and that is, we like an uninterrupted story, and then another way of putting that is that we like a coherent story. Because, as you guys were pointing out, there are going to be some titles like East of West that if you read an individual issue, it may make sense or it may not, or by the time you get to the second issue, you feel that you have to, as I think Andy said, go back and, refresh yourself, maybe reread the previous issue before you read the new issue. So this sense of narrative coherence becomes an issue, which, in a trade you do get that.
But that also speaks to the it's much more difficult to write a 22-page comic that has a beginning, middle, and end, and is a standalone story. It's a lot easier. Well, I'm just speaking. I think. I mean, I'm not a creator, but I would think it would be easier to write a big story, and it's probably more financially viable, and they get more out of their writing by writing a 6-issue arc, or in Jason Aaron's case, a 12-issue arc of a story, breaking it up in 22-page chunks. That way they have one idea that they farm out and get paid for each issue. Whereas if you have to have these self-contained beginning, middle, and end, self-contained stories within each 22-page issue, and then they have to have a thread through them that connects the next one, that's a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. And the writers that do that are really good. Brian K. Vaughan in Saga is the prime example. Those are great issues on their own, but they are also part of a larger narrative. So that really, to me, trades are a problem because people write for them, and it devalues the enjoyment of a single issue. And in my opinion, it's because it's easier to write, and they make more money off of writing that way.
That's an interesting way to think about it, because when I teach classes on comics and graphic novels, and one of the things I talk about in the history of comics is the experience of buying an issue of comics, and that if you had started out, in the 1930s and 40s, you got a 64-page comic with 8 stories in it. And so if we think about breaking down the economics of comics by story rather than, say, by number of pages, that to shorter comics staying the same price and giving you fewer stories until you're down to in the 60s maybe a full length story and a full length novel, as they would say, in one issue, or a one story and a backup, and then once that the economics of that reach a certain point, and we saw especially some backlash with with prices getting too high for individual comics, then you really start to see the move to a story being a 6-issue arc rather than a single issue being any kind of unit of story that we might, any kind of complete unit of story that we might consider.
Right. But if you continue to follow this, and they continue to devalue the importance of the single issue being a standalone story, and sales continue to erode over time, you can see it going to where it's online single issues only, available digitally. This floppy comic dies and goes away, and then they're collected in trade. And if you want it in print, you're going to get it in trade, because there's not going to be single issues anymore, because nobody's going to buy them.
Yeah.
And one more thing, as we talk to the readability of your trades, also I make sure I always have my Saga 1 trade, my Rat Queens Now, and I'll get Manifest. That's the thing I loan out to people who don't read comics, because it's absolutely perfect. I'm not going to hand over my issue 1 of Saga, but I'm going to hand over my trade, and I've given it to 3 or 4 or 5 people. People that don't see the viability of comics or don't understand what the current landscape of comics is, hand them your Saga 1 trade and say, read this and tell me what you think. You can hand them the first Walking Dead trade and say, you've seen the TV show, here's what it began, here's what started as this, here's what the root is. And that's, I love, with your Image trade, your $5 trades, your cheap ones, it's wonderful to get people who aren't into comics, to show people what Image is doing with their kind of, HBO Showtime versions of comics, where they're telling stories where they can be raw and they can do whatever they want to, but they're telling original, wonderful stories.
Well, Kyle, how many issues number 1 Saga do you have?
Just the one. I have one signed by Brian K. Vaughan that I keep in a little plastic cover that I keep off to the side, and I have that whole run in first print just because I love it too much.
Not selling that one, right?
No, but then I have doubles from like 6 on.
This whole idea of writing for the trades, I'm wondering if it, if not devalues the done-in-one single-issue concept, then maybe changes the way that we read comics. And so maybe inherently we kind of think that a done-in-one issue is just not as good as something that's part of a larger whole, let's say a 5 or 6 issue run. Now, on the one hand, I could see this being the case, because someone says, "Hey, wait a minute, this is just a little bitty story and not a larger narrative like you'd find, with a novel, let's say a narrative arc that you find in a trade." But it didn't seem to be the case, though. Let's say with the Eisners, where you have the Pizza Dog issue of Hawkeye, getting the nod. And so there's a case where you have an issue that doesn't necessarily need its neighbors within a particular arc to help it stand on its own, getting a critical nod.
Please don't get my brother started on Hawkeye.
Yeah, let's not talk Hawkeye, because that thing is impossible to read now and a train wreck. Even ships out of order. So that issue, I will grant you, I was writing the Hawkeye train when that came out. That was a beautifully crafted issue. I think ever since then, it's been a plummet, just right down. But that's just my opinion. But
the trade situation for that is going to be interesting too, because they're separating out the the Kate Hawkeye stuff into one trade and the Clint Hawkeye stuff into another trade. So
almost
you're not
like
even,
it's two different comics, which is what it is.
So you're not even going to get a trade that has sequential. There's going to be two trades without sequential issues in them.
See, Kyle?
But on a side story, the Saga trade made us some great money at Comics for Fun and Profit. That very first trade, they bundled in with that 4-issue free pre-story, the Kate Bishop Zero issue from...
Not Saga.
Sorry, I'm talking about Hawkeye, but I'm getting confused. That Hawkeye, they bundled in the first time Matt Fraction wrote about Kate Bishop from, I think it was Young Justice #6 from about 3 or 4 years previous to that, and we had no clue that was even in existence. Yeah, Young Avengers Presents #6, and it was a thing that Fraction wrote on Kate. So we immediately went out and scooped up as many of those as possible because we found out what a wonderful tie-in that was to that Fraction line.
Yeah,
that's good.
That was a discovery we only found because of the trade.
Now, one of the speaking of trade policies that are maddening, one of the collection policies that drives me nuts with DC is, like, right now I'm looking at the first trade of the recent Justice League of America series, and it has issues 1 through 7 in it, but issue 6 and 7 crossover. So you get 2 issues of that series out of sequence, not without any context surrounding them. That doesn't make any sense to me. Whereas when they collected the Throne of Atlantis storyline in a Justice League collection, it contains the issues of Aquaman that are part of that storyline. And in fact, the Aquaman trade for the same storyline is I don't have that up here. Is there's basically 1 issue different in each of the Justice League or Aquaman trades, so they're identical except for that 1 issue.
See, that's a tough call too, because on the one hand, I would want that series collected in sequence in my trade paperbacks, but then I also would want the crossover event to be collected as a whole as well. And if you have both, then you've duped yourself, and you've double dipped, and you didn't want to.
Yeah,
so I can definitely see the argument for both sides on that one.
And they've done it too. I didn't pay any money for these, so I double dipped anyway. But I have the Trinity War collection too, which has, all the issues of Trinity War. So they have at least given those. I guess that's maybe what you're saying, to give collectors those options. And if you want a series completely in sequence, even if the issues are part of a larger crossover, it doesn't matter to you. You can have issues 1 through 7 here. If you want the whole Trinity War story, you get this other book here.
Yeah.
Still another reason to get trades over individual issues is that if you do see the trade as the definitive edition or a collection of some sort as a definitive edition, then I could see where many people would either wait for the trade or just kind of privilege that over individual issues. And I know that this is something that Andy and I have dealt with a number of times, both as in terms of teaching comics and also in terms of writing about comics. Because I can tell you, if you write an essay on a series, it's much more of a pain in the ass to cite and then note in a works cited page individual issues than it is to cite a trade collection or any kind of collection of the storyline. It's just easier to work with. And also, when it comes to collected editions, either in trades or hardcovers, then you have the story that comes after the individual issues, and so you just kind of assume that this is the most recent version of this story that the author, the creators have put out, therefore it's, the definitive edition. If that makes sense. I'm hearing silence, so maybe it doesn't.
I'm trying to process. Is that like APA style?
No, not necessarily. Well, okay. In terms of just basic mechanics, now Andy and I come from a background of English studies, and so more times than not, when we use a style manual, it's going to be the Modern Language Association style manual. And even though there has been hints here and there that MLA is going to come out with some official policy on how to cite, how to list, how to quote, and how to list bibliographically speaking, individual issues of comic books, they haven't yet. And so you can treat a trade like almost any other book, like any regular book, non-comic text, whereas individual issues of comics, what are you going to cite? What are you going to list on the bibliography or a works cited page? And it may sound, like little, namby-pamby things that you have to consider that doesn't get to what the comic's all about. And yeah, it does. But if you do write about comics like this, you have to worry about those little technical issues.
Yeah, I mean, my wife writes a grammar handbook, and she does. There's a whole citation section in there, and we've gone back and forth and trying to kind of cobble together from various MLA rules how to do a comic book. And so she does. There is an example. I've put an example in, or helped her put an example in there of how to cite a comic book.
Yeah, and when I think individuals are starting to attempt to do that. I know several years ago, a good number of years ago, the Popular Culture Association, and it could have been just like 2 or 3 guys getting together deciding what they wanted to do, but they came up with kind of a citation and bibliographic format for using comics in scholarly writing. And they put it up on a web page. It hadn't been updated in years and years, but right now it's probably the thing out there that makes the most sense. And so if I have to make a choice of, how to format something, I'm going to use the information that they provide on this website. And because I have to deal with these issues, it's much easier for me to say, okay, screw the individual issues, I'm just going to use a trade. And if I don't have it, like for instance, several years ago I was doing an article on Scalped, and I definitely got every single issue of Scalped, but it was much easier for me to write that article after I went out and bought the trades.
That is an incredibly small subset of the reasons why
Exactly.
you would prefer a trade. Because it's easier to cite in scholarly writing.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
But I think for even non-scholars, there's this sense that, okay, if something comes out collected and it's the last thing published, then this has to be the most up-to-date, in other words, the most definitive edition of that story.
Yeah, I mean, I've read all of Walking Dead, and I have trades, and I haven't read the early issues in single, but I think I have them in multiple versions, but I would really like to have those phone books that Kyle mentioned earlier. Those I would collect. Now, those aren't really trades; they're more omnibus, but I would like to have those because that would be definitive, 48 issue chunks, and that's something I would keep on my bookshelf. So I would go that way.
I had a question for the Comics for Fun and Profit guys. Since we've talked about collectability, kind of flipping over to when a trade becomes collectible. And it seems like you said earlier, it's when they're out of print. Are there any kind of trends you see recently? Are there trends towards some trades or hardcover collections being ones that collectors should look out for and try to get because they will or may become collectible?
I know Bob loves the Mind Management hardcovers.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't heard from you in a while.
I love it. I got one with an illustration from Matt Kent in the inside cover, and it's one of my favorite collectibles.
And that increased the value over cover price, correct?
I'm sure it's one of them things that we speculate on a lot of stuff, and there's stuff I buy just to flip, and then there's stuff that I just love. I mean, that's the fun side of our thing. So, and that's just one of those things that I guarantee it's not going to ever leave my shelf except when I read it.
That first IDW, the artist editions, the big oversized, the beautiful things that they put out. Some of those have gone out of print, and those are $500-600 now. And I do not have the disposable income to play that game at that level, because I think they're about 125 when they come out. Yeah, they're beautiful. I mean, I've looked at them lovingly on comic book store shelves, and they're great. But I think like the Simonson Thor is one that comes to mind that went out of print and is big money, and I believe one of the early days. The Wally Wood,
the first one,
that's huge. That's kind of a special animal, but that's kind of neat. Some of the lower price stuff that I tend to deal with lower priced comics and just liquidating my collection. But if I find interest in the stuff that's popular, people want to find the Walking Deads, the hardcovers, and the trades out there, and the evergreen stuff. Sandman, Why the Last Man, those sort of things.
And Bob, didn't you get a bunch of Walking Dead trades for cheap through a fire sale not too long ago for a flip, just because some of that stuff you can find a liquidation sale on?
Yeah. That was one of them special moments where it was around Christmas, and
special moment.
It was.
Sounds like it was a Hallmark movie.
In the speculation business, there is special moments where you get a find and you about crap your pants because you're going to be making some money. And they had a whole bunch of Walking Dead hardcovers for next to nothing that I knew I could resell them pretty easily, because a lot of people just read that title, and most of them read it in trade format, and the hardcover was just a icing on the cake. So
Bob brought up the Mind Management collection, right? That was you, Bob?
Yes, sir.
Signed, yeah, and drawn in. That actually brings up another reason I hadn't thought of for buying the trade. I go to Heroes Con every year in Charlotte, since it's close by me, and there's certain artists who show up there every year, like Matt Kent. And I have made it a point now to buy a lot of his stuff in trade, because he will do a sketch in the collection, but we'll just sign the individual issue.
Huh.
Yeah, Fraction and Zdarsky were doing some very creative things at their first trade paperback first con they were at, involving as much white glue as they could on your pages.
Oh.
That is awesome. I'm gonna have to get that. They're both gonna be at Heroes Con. I'm gonna have to get that trade.
Tell them what Kent did to your Red Handed last year.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you've seen what Matt Kent does with his book Red Handed from First Second, but he has a certain page. He opens when you hand it over to him to sign it. He flips the book open to a certain page, and he lights the page on fire.
What?
and then he closes the book, to put the fire out, and it burns off a corner of a page, and it actually ends up creating a new image that clearly seems to have been intentional. That the one page, the exposed corner of the underneath page blends in with the top page to create a new image.
I've heard good things about that. Is it a good read?
It is a good read.
It's really good.
I actually ended up writing a paper and doing a presentation on that. That is, to me, that's part of the same philosophy that Kint has with making those individual issues of mind management a unique experience. That there's an immersive quality to the work he does that puts you into the world, especially with mind management, but with his other works too, where so Red-Handed is about art crimes. So, starting a fire inside a convention center is kind of an art crime. Yeah. And you're implicated in that. You're part of that world. And in mind management, how mind management, the pages are look like their original art pages. So I made the argument that we're reading a secret document from mind management.
Yeah.
And mind management exists in our world, and either we've had our brains wiped out by them, so we don't know why we happen to have access to this thing, or we've somehow managed to get this thing. But whatever it is, that he blurs the fictional and real worlds.
That's very meta.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I can think of a handful of other artists that do that. I mean, one show I had one of those big Annihilation collections from Marvel, and one of the artists was there. I can't remember who, and I asked him to sign it, and there was a whole bunch of people who had contributed to that at this show. So I was getting a bunch of signatures, and he did a little Quasar sketch in it. And the guy sitting next to him, the other artist sitting next to him, said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, if somebody buys the hardcover, I feel like I should give them a little something extra.
That's cool.
That is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing a post on our blog of like taking pictures of all the different stuff, the sketches.
Do it.
What's his name? Darwin Cook does it too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Something that I don't think has come up tonight in our conversation is we've discussed what trades tend to do in terms of writing for comics, where now individual issues are written, as Drew pointed out, in ways that they are just one part of the larger story. But what about other things that the popularity of trades, relatively speaking, has done to individual issues? Where, I mean, there are some series that no longer exist in serial form. One case in point is one of my favorite comics, and this is out of Drawn and Quarterly, and that is Seth's Palookaville. Now I think I've got all issues of Palookaville going back quite a number of years, and yeah, those issues of the serial didn't come out regularly, like every several months, maybe 2, sometimes 3 a year if you're lucky. But now we have Palookaville coming out in, I guess, what we could call a graphic novel form, a collected form. But it's not collected because it's never come out previously, and it tends to come out about every 2 years or so. And so you have a thicker issue in like a graphic novel format. So if you had, let's say, with an individual issue of Palookaville, something like, and I can't remember, but let's say for argument's sake, 30 or 30-some pages, with the graphic novel format, you may get anywhere from 80 to 110, let's say. So it may be worth the wait. But what it does then is it takes away from the serial aspect of that particular title. And even if I did have to wait several months, half a year or so, for an issue of Palookaville, God, now I have to wait a year or two for an issue. And the same thing with another good example is Love and Rockets. This is something that Andy and I talk about often on the Comics Alternative. And, we love Love and Rockets, but now it comes out again consistently. I mean, they're not late on this, but it comes out just once a year. So it doesn't come out about every 3 months or so, as, let's say, the title used to.
Wow, that's a real wait. That's really trade waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's some of these titles that no longer exist, and I think a lot of this is with the alternative, what you would call the alternative press or the alternative publishers. For instance, Joe Matt's Peep Show. I can't remember when the last issue of Peep Show from Drawn and Corley was ever released. You don't have that anymore. You don't have Peter Baggs' Hate. In fact, Hate turned into an annual, I don't know, about 13, 14 years ago, and even then the annual didn't come out every year after a while. And I think that he has no plans on even continuing the Hate annual now. So that's a title that, even if it came out infrequently, no longer exists because these creators are writing, not necessarily writing for the trades, but they're writing for the graphic novel, what we can call the graphic novel format. Because that may be more economically viable.
I think it is. I mean, again, to go back to my interview with Laramie, he was talking about the payouts for him. He makes about 50 cents a single issue comic when it comes out, but when that trade came out, it was closer to $4 per trade. So that same 4,000 copies that really is a nice check for him when the trade comes out, even if it's about the same level of a single issue. So I think there's a much different economic setup there for the trades and the creators.
So it's about it in that situation. It's basically he gets $1 more for the number of issues in the trade, right? So he'll end up getting about $3 an issue or $3 total for 6 issues.
Well, 4.
Right?
I think he said 4.
Oh, he's doing 4. Oh, okay, that's even better.
Yeah. I think he said he got 4 for the trade, and 50 cents an issue. So
yeah. But how many issues are in the trade?
Oh, he has 6,
7.
Yeah, so that's the $3.
Yeah, you're right.
Individual issues, and then
Kyle's right. There's 7 in his trade.
Oh, okay.
And so that would be $3.50. So he's actually I guess he's getting paid again for his 7 issues, basically. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
Now I know some creators, are kind of behind the scenes at Image, don't really like the $9.99 trade deal, and some of them resist it and actually don't do it, and others do it.
Laramie's is $19.99.
Yeah. Because some of them feel like their audience is their audience. They're going to sell X number of copies no matter what, so why sell X number of copies at $9.99 when you can sell them at $14.99?
Yeah, I think folks like Brian K. Vaughan and Robert Kirkman, they have the luxury of, having a lot of cash and not have to worry about that sort of thing, and they can do that and pass that savings along and play back the long game a little easier than others.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, they have value just their very name, right? So even if they don't have cash where they can afford to do that, I mean, almost anything that Brian K. Vaughan puts out, almost anything now that Robert Kirkman puts out, almost anything now that Ed Brubaker puts out, it's going to get bought by a lot of people. And so they have more of a luxury in ways that people like Laramie does not.
Yes.
Just because of sheer, not only name recognition, but I mean, they've been around a lot longer, and so, this is something that they've earned. And so, there is a particular Brian K. Vaughan brand that we come to expect, just like Ed Brubaker. I mean, if Ed Brubaker suddenly came out with, a little frou-frou funny animal story and called it, Little Gothic or something, I would be floored. because it would come out of nowhere. But if I know that Ed Brubaker is doing something, regardless of publisher, I'm probably going to buy it, because there's certain things I expect from Ed Brubaker, and I love everything that I've read of his, mainstream and otherwise. So I'm going to tend to gravitate to him because he's Ed Brubaker.
Fans of our show will know that Derek buys anything that has the word Lil in the title.
L-I-L apostrophe?
Yes, he is in the tank for all the Lil stuff.
Does he have an iPod full of Lil Wayne songs?
In fact, Andy caught me being inconsistent on this most recent podcast that went up today. We were going through the June previews catalog, which has a lot of really good stuff. And one of the things I was really looking forward to is that Terry Moore has a new comic coming out called SIP Kids. So basically it's his Strangers in Paradise characters that he hasn't visited with since 2007, and he's writing them as kids. And so I said, I'm looking forward to that. And then Andy said, well, doesn't this contradict your, no little comics policy? So yeah, you're right.
I think we both submit, both our podcasts submit clips to John's show.
Comic book
his weekly, his comic book preview spotlight. And I always enjoy your clips because they're, for some reason, the stuff that you find I have overlooked in the back half of previews. There's just so much stuff in there. And you always find something really cool from Fantagraphics or First Second, and I have to go take a second look. So I always appreciate the stuff that you dig up back there.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks. And I think a lot of that just comes from the nature of at least what Andy and I do, and not only together on the Comics Alternative podcast, but just individually, right? I mean, on our very first episode, which we called a Comics Alternative Manifesto, we went back and forth and kind of wrestled with this label of alternative comics. What does it mean? Do we want to call it that? Should we call it something else? But a lot of the comics that we do tend to discuss, and I guess privilege on the show, are those that come in the back half of the catalog. I mean, again, we do a lot of things with the premium publishers or the premier publishers and the big two, but there are a lot of publishers like Fantagraphics, like Drawn and Quarterly, like Uncivilized Books, like First Second, Top Shelf, that they don't tend to get a lot of press, at least in terms of mainstream comics discussions. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, with those publishers, more times than not, you will not find individual single issues. It's all either not just trades, but original graphic novels or books that have not been serialized at all.
Yeah, these are the
you guys probably recognized a lot more of the Eisner Awards than we did when we went through them.
Well, I listened to their episode, and they weren't that far ahead of us.
Yeah, okay.
They were stumped on a few as well. I thought that was interesting. We weren't that bad. It was surprising.
Although Andy did mention something, he came up with this phenomena that he called the comics alternative bump. And he believes that because we talked about some of the title, or many of the titles actually that were on the list this year, that we had something to do with it. We'd like to think that.
I also liked Andy's plan to get to know, in quotes, the judges for Eisner's, and that's the best way to get your podcast nominated, because they'll pound the table for you when it comes time for nominations. I like that plan as well. So
doesn't work. Because, they now have a policy of having at least one comic scholar and one librarian on the judging panel, and those the world of comic scholarship is a very, very small world, and so most people know each other pretty well. So on the one hand, I've gotten to be able to talk to judges and find out what really goes on in the room, and that stuff happens. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem to help.
Yeah.
But are you on the short list to be one of those judges?
I don't know. I would love it. I would love to do it. I think, something we can talk about after the show. But I would guess Derek has a faster track to be on the be a judge than I do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'd love to be. It'd be great if they asked, because we both did the podcast. Could you guys be on there jointly? It's like, yeah. The thing with our podcast, when we first were conceiving of, okay, what would the comics alternative be? We thought, okay, this would be a way of kind of straddling both, a fan audience and a more scholarly audience, and kind of bringing them together. And I think we've tried to do that throughout. We're almost up to our 2-year anniversary now, but I really don't think we have many comic scholars listening to the podcast, because I don't think that there are a lot of comics. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if there are a lot of comic scholars who listen to podcasts.
John and I have this conversation every once in a while too. There's really not that many folks that read comics, and then that subset of that audience, there's not that many of those. There's only a certain percentage of those that take the time to listen to a podcast, and then the fact that there are so many comic podcasts, it's really tough to rise above it, because it's such a small audience for those folks that are trying to quit their jobs and make a living off of podcasting on comics. My hat's off to them, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I wonder what the percentage of comic readers who have podcasts is.
I think it's probably the highest per capita
of any hobby.
Yes, it'll have to be. They're just tons out there.
Well, I just recently started to listen to the podcast called Podcasters Roundtable, where they have every episode, podcasters from a variety of different areas come together and talk about, a particular topic or theme. And there's just podcasts about things that I didn't. I mean, beekeeping in New Zealand. Now, my dad was a beekeeper, so it's like, okay, it makes sense. It'd be nice to have a podcast that is devoted to beekeeping. But I would never do that, and I would think that would be definitely a rarity, unlike comics podcasts.
Yeah.
So there's one for almost anything under the sun.
Well, we keep getting we host on Podomatic right now, which is and we keep getting our butts kicked by the knitting podcast. So
that's a huge culture,
us, and so we can't compete. We can't keep with the knitting housewives. So I haven't figured out the formula yet.
Or didn't? And it's not just housewives. Didn't Rosie Greer? Oh no, that was Rosie Greer did some other kind of craft. It wasn't knitting. Remember years ago this came out?
Is he a football player?
Yeah, former.
He did It's All Right to Cry. I remember that.
Yeah. Anyway, that kind of fell flat. But well, we've drifted a little from our topic. But I mean, I do think that when you guys were mentioning finding a voice within the podcasting, specifically comics podcasting community, I think that both of our podcasts have attempted to do that in different ways. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it was good that both of us, Comics for Fun and Profit and then the Comics Alternative, came together to discuss this topic of trade waiting, because we can see from today's discussion, I mean, we're coming at it from different angles, and and some of those different angles have something to do with the nature of our podcasts. Some of those differences from just our individual tastes and reading habits. So I think issues of collectability have come into play here, as well as whether something actually does have a serial anymore. A lot of the titles we discuss are no longer released in that format. So.
Well, you guys read single issue comics as young kids, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, spinner racks at 7-Elevens and grocery stores and things of that sort.
And those comics, I may be looking back through rose-colored glasses, but they were worth your 50 cents or 75 cents.
Yeah.
They were jammed full of pages. They were really good stories, and I just think the waiting for the trade mentality has watered down the single issue so much that it's really tough to find good experiences. I mean, there's a lot of great comics out there, because I read a lot of them, and I enjoy a lot of comics. So I'm not crying about the woeful great days of yore, but I just think that this has devalued it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back now. This is going to date me, but when one of the key moments for me as a comic reader was when Wolfman and Perez's New Teen Titans #1 came out, and when that series came out every month, I sat down and reread every issue of it, and then read the new issue.
Yeah.
So, as a collector, my copies of those issues, that series which I have, are a mess.
The same
they're
way
a
with
disaster.
Moon Knight.
Yeah.
The same with Moon Knight. I've just read them, and I cannot tell you a comic that I've reread recently. I don't think I do. I don't reread anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of much either, unless it's as Derek talked about for research or something. But yeah, I mean, and I did that with New Teen Titans for years. So there were and plus I had the time to sit down and read 36 issues of a comic or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm planning on reading X-Men Days of Future Past, the trade on that before I go see the movie coming out. So there's a few things I have plan on rereading or going back to check out.
Yeah.
There are certain key titles that I will even now go back and reread, let's say the previous 3 or 4 issues. My reading habits with the serials that I get is many times I don't keep up with them. So 4, sometimes 5 months can go by and say I haven't read an issue of Fables, or The Massive. Which I continue to get in single issues. So, what I'll do is I'll decide I got to get caught up. And so I will, before I get caught up, since it's been so long, I'll go back and reread the previous several issues before, that where I had left off. And certain titles I'll do those with, Fables, The Massive, Mind Management, Manhattan Projects. Those I will go back and reread in a limited way, but only because of memory issues, I guess.
And The Massive is usually 3-issue story arcs, aren't?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
they have been recently. They're just 3-issue chunks, so they're kind of mini trades, I guess.
Yeah.
I usually let them stack up like that too, and read them in 3-issue chunks.
Or let's say DC issues Forever Evil 7 about 3 months late. You have to go back and read 4 or 5 of those beforehand just to get into that 7th one. So there's some rereading involved for that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
And there you go, another reason to maybe go with the trades instead of the individual issues. And this is on the publisher's part, right? Because if for whatever reason, they're late in getting issues out, and it could be the creator's problem, but the publishers ultimately, the buck should stop with them because they're the one putting the stuff out. So if they're several months late with an issue, I can see where that would frustrate. For instance, like Kyle, and any number of readers would just say, "Screw it, I'm stopping with this, and we'll just wait till they get their act together and come out with a trade."
Yeah, we love comics, but then we hate comics too sometimes when they do stuff like that.
Like a true fan.
Exactly.
Oh, well, guys, we've covered quite a bit of ground this evening in our discussion. Any final thoughts on trades versus individual issues?
Love trades. Wish I could wait on them, but I just can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's killing the industry, but I don't have any proof to that. I guess it just feels like it's really killing the industry, and but I do understand it because there are titles that really makes better sense in trades. So it's a necessary evil, I guess.
Well, with me, they're making more money because I usually only buy trades of single issues that I've already read. So there goes the double dipping again.
Yeah.
Andy, your final thoughts?
Oh, well, I'm all over the place on trades and individual issues. So and I even double dip sometimes myself too. So.
Yeah,
but I like all the options.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we haven't really discussed yet, is that fact that we do have these options, and not only between single issues and trades, but larger collections, for instance, deluxe editions or absolute editions or omnibuses. I mean, there's the option for us not only just to double and triple dip, but to quadruple dip. It's just amazing.
Yeah, they have. There's an endless amount of ways that they can take my money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, this has been fun. I'm glad we took the time to get together. We'll have to do another crossover.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. We had a good time.
That was fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that conversation. We got into some stuff about trade waiting, but as our crossover podcasts usually go, we get off on tangents as well.
Yeah, and we did that especially toward the end, but they're productive and informative tangents. In fact, had we more time, I would have been interested in talking with them about the ins and outs of their particular podcast, how they got started, what they have to deal with in terms of getting 3 and not just 2 people together. That's because that's what we have to do. Mm-hmm. And also what they've done in terms of trying to get sponsors, because, the DCB service stuff came up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some other time.
Yep.
Fun discussion. And on the topic of Discount Comic Book Service, that's who sponsored this episode of the Comics Alternative. So be sure to go to dcbservice.com. Go there, and they will help you with all your comics pre-ordering needs. And if you want to buy trades that are already out, as we discussed, in the round table, some people prefer trades over the single issues. You can do so by visiting DCBS's sister company, InStock Trades. That's InStockTrades.com. And after you've gone to get your comics wherever you get them, DCB Service or InStock Trades, then give us a call and let us know the kind of things that you want to read. You can call us. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right. Or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2 guys at comicsalternative.com, and you can get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com, and you are?
Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we have our Twitter feed where we make announcements about upcoming episodes as well as new content to our blog. You can find our Twitter feed at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. We're also on Facebook. Go to Facebook, type in Comics Alternative, one word. You'll instantly and easily find us. Go there and like us. We're also on Tumblr, comicsalternative.tumblr.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us through Stitcher. And as always, you can find the podcast and our many and growing number of reviews and comics-related commentary on the blog at comicsalternative.com.
That's right.
A lot of good stuff. And we had a great conversation today. But we will be back next week for our regular review show. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.
Thank you for letting me reminisce a little bit about Derek Royal. Rest in peace, buddy.